Hey, Christy, thanks for having me on here.
It's my pleasure because you are so good at what you do. I want to have a conversation here just for a minute so that we can explain to the American people what it looks like when taking a mortgage loan and do we call it converting it or paying it off into a line of credit?
I mean, technically, it's considered a refinance if you own the property, even if you have the property owned free and clear, um, or if you have a debt on the property with a 30-year mortgage. Technically, you'd be refinancing it into a new product at the end of the day.
Okay. So tell me why is it such a major change when I deal like I was just showing and you were probably listening to the
Yeah.
second mortgage that I dealt with earlier. I was floored at 11.65% for that product on a 20-year payback period. She was just getting mutilated with interest.
Totally.
And when I showed her the numbers of taking that first and second and putting it into an all-in-one or a first lien HELOC, it cut the payoff period on that from 20 years down to less than 7 years. And, we can fall over when we hear that. But the fact is, it's just math.
Yeah, I mean, that 260% increase of interest is insane. Now, by all means, doesn't mean that doing a second position, if you need to do a second position, isn't the step that you need to take to perhaps get into something like this. I think you said their cash flow increased because their payment went down to $780. A lot of people get in trouble with these second position HELOCs purely because they're saying, oh, my payment went from 1,500 to 700. I have this extra money that I can go out and use for something else. I think priority number one is to take that extra $800 every single month and work on paying that debt off. Because if you don't, like you just experienced, you're going to spend way more in interest than you ever would have in the other debts. So it's really about being diligent. I think that so many people get into a problem when they say, oh, my credit card has a low interest rate, my car payment has a low interest rate, my mortgage has low interest. I'm just going to get this other mortgage that has a high interest and I'm going to go do these other things. There is a level of, I need to buckle down, perhaps be a little more diligent on my spending, and work on paying off these other expenses that aren't what's keeping me alive: food, gas, groceries, etc.
Right.
um, that is kind of one of the major things that people run into problems with. We're experiencing that right now that we're 4 years away from perfectly low 2% interest rates. We've seen people's credit card bills be really high, multiple car payments. We're seeing that, and you can find information online that we are at the highest level of consumer debt that we've ever been at in the country. And yes, we are also at the highest level equity in homes, but really just trying to understand, okay, did I accidentally, write a check for a little more than I could have written for? And how can I reverse this without seeing my credit get hit, without, any major problems like foreclosure or bankruptcy or anything along those lines?
Right. So tell us a little bit about the all-in-one first lien. I want to kind of let the people know that they are basically the same product. They have a few differences, but the all-in-one is what you mainly deal with. So let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about the product in general. How does it function?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, without getting really in depth about the product really is just a really large credit card that's on your home. Now, not at the same interest rates as credit cards, but conceptually, have a credit card. If you have a line of credit of $50,000 and you owe $10,000, your payment's not based off of the $50,000 line of credit. It's based off the $10,000. You have room, that 40,000, to go and use for what you need to, and your payment's only based off what you owe. So realistically, in an individual scenario, if they have a $500,000 house and they get a line of credit for their home 400,000, 80%, and they only owe 150,000, well, they have that available credit of 250,000 that they can use for whatever they want. But while they're not using it, their payment's only based off of $150,000. Where this change is a little different than just a regular second position line of credit is that instead of making your mortgage payment, instead of paying your credit cards, and instead of paying your HELOC payment, you are essentially consolidating all of those into one location. So instead of your money, extra money sitting in your checking account doing nothing, that money, extra money just sits against your home while you're waiting to use it, while you're waiting to deploy it for, one of two things, either an investment or something that you want, kind of a need versus want. It's just sitting against your home and your payments just based off of what you owe on the home. That's how we see people expedite their payoff drastically. By no means is it you need to be saving $2,000 perfectly every single month, because life does happen. This loan allows for the maneuver, it allows for the waves of life. If you lose a job and you have this line of credit, that's okay. You won't experience a late payment because you have that room in your line of credit to go and find a new job, get yourself back on your feet, and never really have any negative impact to your credit scores. Still pay your bills, groceries, gas, etc. This line of credit really is just a way to have all of that financing funneled into one location to allow for an individual to have like a hyper efficient use of their money until they decide to spend it. Again, depending on the goals of the person, I like to think that there's two modes of thought. You either want debt elimination, pretty simple. I want to pay my home off as fast as possible. We see this in people that are nearing retirement age or wanting to retire at a certain time frame. I want to retire in 10 years. Okay, well, let's build a game plan with you to retire in 10 years. This is how you need to do it. There's the other side of the coin, which is debt accumulation, which is I want to use this line of credit because my home appreciated so much over the last 5 years that I want to start buying more real estate. I want to start depositing my funds into other investments, whether that's the market, whether that's your whole life policy, whether that's whatever you can come up with for an investment opportunity, and you need cash. We see a lot of people use that from this line of credit. Yes, they end up paying their home off slightly later, but I believe that if they pulled out $100,000, clearly they're going to pay their home off a little later than they would if they never pulled it out at the end of the day. However, if that $100,000 went to go buying a duplex, and now those families are paying that mortgage payment, and you have a couple extra bucks left over, you can let it sit in your home and you can just rinse and repeat that cycle until you've reached the goal that you've set for yourself.
See, that's what I love about it is with my HELOC, I look at it as something to honestly fund my infinite policies with. So I'm really big on that. I think that becoming my own bank is probably the most exciting thing that I've run across here in years. Then you're talking about buying another property with your equity in your property and not having to take on another mortgage. So when I think HELOC, a lot of people kind of shut down because they're like, but Dave Ramsey told us not to use a HELOC, and so I kind of look at it as a way to, like you said, build your wealth with the acquisition of new properties or funding these infinite policies or another investment that you may have, an idea for. The point is that it just makes the equity available for you to be able to use rather than it to be tied up in something that you have to go get a loan to borrow for. I mean, when people figure that out, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have people every day that tell me I didn't even know this was available to have a line of credit like this. So tell me your experience though with dealing with people. What is the average payoff that you see when they're coming out of the mortgage and they're refining into this line of credit?
Yeah. So, I mean, for the people that want to have their home be paid off, the debt elimination group at the end of the day, we see the average payoff for those individuals between 5 and 10 years. Now, in many instances, this isn't one of those things where it's like, hey, you get this loan and it's the best loan for you. There are certain requirements that we like to set to make sure that it is a good product for you. We've never had a foreclosure on this loan. And that's because we make sure that the individuals that go into it have plenty of education, obviously have the proper income asset requirements. And realistically, those individuals that use the loan to its fullest extent, and I can get into what that means here in a second, but for those people that use it to its fullest extent, how it's intended to be used, we see people expedite their payoff drastically. Again, 5 to 10 years.
Wow, that's awesome. So I have a question
Mhm.
about a recast in here. I have my own answer, but I'm going to read it to you and then you answer it the way you deem necessary.
Okay.
So it says, would you recommend a large payment towards the first mortgage and have the payments recast, then do a second, assuming you do have the smaller 2.5% interest rate? I guess he's talking about that. But the recast, how do you feel about the recast compared to moving into the all-in-one?
Again, I think that really depends on the individual's specific scenario. However, I think the recast is a phenomenal vehicle to take advantage of for you to lower the payment on your home. Because we had seen rates go as low as 2% at some point in the last 5 or 6 years, even getting that second mortgage after they pay their balance down could result in them still spending less in interest if they're, again, building the proper game plan to eliminate that debt once they pull the money out. By no means is getting a HELOC, the second position HELOC, the best solution if you plan on just making the interest only payment.
Right.
You need to sit down, run the math, and say, okay, great. If I need to pay this, I want to pay this off in 5 years. Well, this is how I need to do it. Does my excess and savings allow for me to do that and still do all the other things that I need to do?
Do you, I'm wondering because I'm reading comments and I'm wondering if people understand what you just said a minute ago. What I see every day is some of the, especially 3%, 2.85% mortgages. I'm sorry. I see that when we run the numbers, and it's just math, that they can go from a 26-year payoff, 27, 28, 30 years, even 22, 30 years. I've seen this happen daily, that the payoff on the home can go from those periods, 20 to 30 years, down to this 5 to 10 year payoff. So I don't think, because I think we're so um, brainwashed almost in the loan, that people can't understand that the line not only gives you access to equity that you maybe can't tap into with the mortgage, but there's such a difference in the payoff period because you're able to throw your income into this line and, like you said, let it sit there until you need to use it for, gas expenses, paying a car loan, whatever it is that you have debt wise and expense wise. But you know what? Getting people to understand that the mortgage interest, the way it's calculated, is so different from the line of credit, to the
Yeah.
point that if you're able to use the line at revolving with your income going in, your expenses coming out, we're talking about maybe 2 decades less in paying off your mortgage. I mean, people, are you hearing what I'm saying? Because you're talking about the recast, you're talking about, these other things to do with the mortgage, but I'm talking about coming away from a loan that most people think we have to buy a home, which you're getting ready to tell us, Harrison, that you don't even have to ever move into the mortgage, that you can go straight into the line of credit. But if we can bring people's thought process to, wait a minute, I don't have to have a mortgage. I don't have to have a 20 or 30-year payoff period. I can have the 5 to 10 year payoff period. So, talking about just the mindset that you deal with people, and that feeling that, well, this is more insecure than the mortgage. What do you tell people when you run across that? Because I hear that every day. Well, I don't want to do that. I'm going to stay in the mortgage because it's safer. How do you feel about that?
So I love this question because I like to understand what they mean by safer. Is safer the fact that their payment isn't going to change and that they can recognize that whether it's month one or 121, that what they spend every month is the same, or is safer the amount of interest you spend. The crazy thing is that at about this, and this isn't exact, but at about a 2.75% interest rate, you spend 50% of what you have borrowed in interest.
Right.
At about 5.5% in interest, you spend 100% of what you borrow in interest. So rates currently are not at 5.5%. They're around the mid to high six range. So you're spending well over 120, 130% in interest. If somebody has a $400,000 balance on their home and they're at a 5.5 or 6% in interest, they're going to spend at least $400,000 up to maybe $500,000 in interest. So is the risk that you're experiencing because it's a safe payment, I feel less risky, or is the risk that you're experiencing really going to be, I'm spending $500,000 as opposed to maybe spending $200,000 if I changed the product or the vehicle I'm using? In my opinion, the risk is what is coming out of my pocket to feed the person's, the bank's life at the end of the day.
Right.
My opinion is that 30-year mortgages for the right people are more risky. In some instances, some people have no choice. I'm buying my first home. I'm putting 3 or 3.5% down. Good. Get into the home. Build your generational wealth that way by allowing for to appreciate, put some elbow grease into it. Once you are ready to sell and you're at that next stage of life, you've built up enough money, your income has changed, you can change the vehicle you're going into and you can purchase a home in this product. You don't just have to refi into it, like you said.
Right.
But risk is really a determinant on, well, what do you consider as risky? Is it the interest spent, or is it the fact that I have a number on a piece of paper that's lower than this other number? However, the money that I'm spending, the thing that I'm working for, is much higher than in a 30-year mortgage than it would be in potentially this first lien HELOC.
Right, right. And I agree with you. A lot of people feel like it's safer. The mortgage is safer because the HELOC has the variable interest rate, or that, the HELOC, well, they might decide to call that or, freeze it. How do you feel about that?
And are you talking about freezing the line of credit?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that back in the day when we had that major recession and those second lien HELOCs, which are typically considered riskier because it's an additional line of credit on top of a balance on the home, it's a big credit card,
Right.
which is why you usually see those interest rates higher. And that's mainly because the person has already had a low loan balance, their value's gone up. Now they're taking advantage of money that they may have never put into the product. Whereas with the all-in-one and these first lien HELOCs, you're paying that balance down. It's your checking account. So they're not taking away your checking account. Now, with that being said, that does not mean that in some instances they could perhaps say, hey, what's happening if you had $500,000 of available equity in your home, and month over month you're slowly pulling it out and you haven't made a single deposit for 3 or 4 years, you can assure yourself you're going to get a phone call and say, hey, is everything okay? Are you all right? Are you alive?
Right.
Which you would also want to have happen. You want the people on the other side of the coin to at least make sure that you're okay, everything's all right, work with you and build the game plan to get you on the right path again.
Right. And that's a very good thought. That's a very good thought because sometimes I'll get a call and they'll say, hey, such and such moved into this first lien HELOC or whatever, and they are not, they're actually getting to their limit. What's going on? And I think that's a great call when the bank checks on you to make sure that, hey, do you realize that you're getting to your limit here? You're not paying off the home, you're spending too much, whatever. So I think that that is really, really good of a bank to do, to keep an eye on that. But we have a question, and he says, I believe we just touched this just a little bit. He says, can you purchase a home with the all-in-one or first lien HELOC?
Yes, you certainly can purchase it in that. Now, certain states have certain levels of requirements. For the most part, we like to say, hey, we want you to have 20% down. Now, there are 10% down options. Personally, I think that because you're doing less than 20% down, there are some increased expenses. However, if somebody says, I want to buy this home before I sell this one, I have the money for down payment to do 10%. I'm okay coming in with a little extra because when I sell this one, I'm going to pay this down so much that my interest savings is far superior than any other avenue of buying the home. It's kind of like saying, Christy, would you give me $10,000 if I was going to give you $500,000? Obviously, you would give me $10,000 if I was going to be able to do. It's kind of like
Right.
saying that. Would you be okay spending a little bit more to save drastically more in interest? It's the same example.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, so let me look through. Is there a limit on acres that are allowed?
There is for the most part, there's 10-acre requirements. We do have a program that does allow for us to go above 10 acres. However, it really is going to depend on that specific property. The reason why I say that is if it's normal for the area, for the most part, I would say yes. Even more than that, the land can't be vastly more valuable than the home. If it's a 800 square foot home on 10,000 acres, I would assume the land's worth more than the home. We
Right.
need to make sure that that home has its own intrinsic value.
Okay. Okay, so let's see. We got more questions here. I love all of the views of the recast compared to the first lien HELOC. Mine is seeing interest amounts overall. My current overall interest on the 2.5 is less than what the overall interest cost would be on the HELOC, I'm assuming. So
Presuming, yes.
we're talking that's your very first month is your very highest interest charge if you are using the HELOC correctly. Okay, so that's the mindset. Well, wait a minute. Let's just run numbers. So $200,000 for a balance, and let's say it's an 8%, so times 8%. That's 16,000 for the entire year in interest divided by 12. So you're talking about $1,333.33 would be your first month's interest charge on a $200,000 HELOC at 8%. So he's saying, well, my mortgage is only charging me, $1,000 in interest right now for this month. But this is going to be $1,333 for the month. How do you play that out in their mind so that they understand what we're talking about with less interest charges?
Yeah, I mean, so there's kind of again two thoughts, and of perhaps what he's saying. One, I think that if the total interest in the remaining time frame for his 30-year mortgage is less than the total interest of the all-in-one, then that may be based off of how much money is retained at the end of every single month, which is certainly possible. By no means do I want somebody, nor would anyone want to get out of a 2.5% to go into something that they end up spending more in interest if we compare it apples to apples. Now, the good thing about the all-in-one, where you may end up spending more in interest, is, well, I also have a car payment and I also have these student loans and I have credit cards. Oh, yeah. And I want to buy another rental property. Oh, and I haven't started my whole life policy, so I want to do that. Well, inherently, if you're going to be having all of these other expenses to eliminate and create other accounts and other investment vehicles, I think that there is a vast superiority to the all-in-one than sticking into your current loan where you're strapped because all the equity is just locked in the walls of your home. But if it's just apples to apples, then I would say stick in your 2.5% mortgage if you don't plan on using the all-in-one or a first lien HELOC to its capabilities. But if you have other aspirations of rental properties, debt elimination, whole life policies, and so on, it may make sense to say, okay, I need to build my true goal game plan out and then look at seeing how that works in this product.
Right. Okay. So let's read on here. We might have another. I don't want to keep you on here too long, but I'm
No,
kind
I
of.
don't want to steal everyone's time.
Yeah. So also, one person is saying that their dad is a longtime banker, and he's screaming at him, "No, the HELOC will bite you. Don't do it." Do you have any suggestions for him? He says he cannot talk his dad out of looking at it any other way.
I'd love to just chat with your dad and kind of learn about him. I mean, if the fact that you've been in the industry for so long, I think that there's a lot of things that we could learn from you and hopefully not repeat in the future by all means, something that you've experienced in the past. You know, the first mortgage in the HELOC, in my opinion, is kind of like the runner up to just the first position line of credit if everything remains equal. The benefit of that first position HELOC is that if the second you get paid, that money goes towards your mortgage balance. And the second that money gets entered to your mortgage balance, your payment is now calculated off of what you owe. And as long as you're spending on average less than what you earn, month over month, that's going to continue to compound to where if your household is only saving $2,000 a month, just easy math. But if after 2 years, that savings goes from $2,000 to 35 to $3,000 because your mortgage expense went down by $1,000, well, now you're increasing that money you're saving every month, which is just hammering away, expediting that snowball down that hill to pay the home off faster.
Right. Okay. And that's kind of, you just answered Shane's question because he's talking again about the interest on a $500,000 first lien HELOC at 8% is fairly significant. And he's correct. But you just answered that by saying that the income going in, the cash flow being significant, you're going to be reducing that balance every single month and you're going to be reducing that interest charge every single month. Okay, I hope that makes sense, Shane. The point is that of course you have to have cash flow, guys. If you don't have cash flow, velocity banking doesn't work for you. I don't care if you're using a first lien HELOC or a $500 credit card. You have to have a more cash flow. You have to
Mhm.
have cash flow to make this work. And then in my calculations, when I'm working with someone that has a first lien, second position HELOC, whatever, we're going to see how the cash flow compares to what their interest charge is per month. Because I don't want anybody to jump into a product that, you have $1,000 in interest charges and you only have $1,100 in cash flow a month, you're just going to see that reducing very little, very slowly. I don't even like to do that. So, Shane, I hope that that makes sense to you, that it's based on your cash flow going in and sitting there on this balance so that you're reducing the balance, which is reducing your interest charges for the month. I hope I said that right, Harrison. Did that sound good?
That sounds perfect.
Okay, good.
I do
Okay.
see one question in here. Someone asked what if you want to build and add on to your home? So, um, just as there's a normal purchase transaction with this product, we actually do have a construction loan to where we will acquire the land, we'll do the construction for the builder, and it almost works as the inverse to the all-in-one, meaning you owe zero until you pay for the home or pay for the land through the loan, and the builder takes their initial draw. Let's just say that that adds up to $200,000, but you have $500,000 of total money needing to go out to the builder. The second that initial draw comes out, the individual will get their bank account. They'll have a $200,000 line of credit with a $200,000 balance, and they can start depositing their money to it until their builder says, great, we need to pull out another $100,000. And then your line of credit goes up 100, your mortgage balance goes up 100. So you're actually kind of starting on the inverse side of the coin to where your interest starts off low because you have a low balance until the home's complete and built. Then you just go into a regular all-in-one product. But during that time frame, you've been able to save so much extra cash because your interest starts at the bottom and works its way up to when they pull out all the money. And then you can start paying it off. And that has been a very phenomenal product as of lately.
Wow, I didn't even know that it did that. So you're teaching me something every time we go on together. So I appreciate you for doing that. So Shane said that was very helpful. I'm very glad. I love it when we're giving people some information here so they can build. Um, People, we're just not educated, and I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to myself. Every day you learn something new,
Mhm.
and I learned something fabulous every day, just like what he told us. So Harrison, in the event that somebody, watching the video either now or later, wants to buy a home, What is their first step with your company? What's the very first thing they need to do to get ready to purchase the home?
Give us a call. I mean, we want to make sure, obviously, that the qualifications, we want to go through the process of the application and documentation to make sure that they're able to qualify and that this product makes sense. Because just as I'm a huge proponent of helping people get into it, I'm just as big of a proponent of saying, hey, right now, this isn't the best product for you. However, with these steps, here's how you can get into it. And I can post a link in the chat after we're done so that anybody that wants to have a phone call and communicate more about their specific scenario, there's the form. Thank you so much. Um, then we should be able to just have a phone call and we'll learn about your scenario. You guys get to meet the team. Hopefully, you guys are okay with a couple of not that funny jokes that I find funny. But we just want to make sure that it makes the most sense for you. And if we're not the best solution for you, by all means, I want to make sure that we cross one thing off the list and we would like to, communicate with you. That's what we would prefer.
Well, I completely am sold on the HELOC product. So anybody out there that you're feeling, yeah, but I've heard, then just keep studying, keep, watching videos. And you might want to get a baby line. I was telling a couple I was just working with, start small. You don't have to, jump into a $500,000 first lien HELOC. And I wouldn't even suggest that. Start small. Start using your credit cards with Velocity Banking. Move into a personal line of credit that might be $5,000 and revolve it for a while. Get the feeling of the peace that these lines of credit bring. Don't jump in head first until you're sold on you know what you're doing with it and how it's going to work for you. I think I probably say that 300 times a day that nobody should ever jump into anything that you are not absolutely sure you know how to use and what the results are going to be for you. But I wanted to bring Harrison on here to answer some questions. I put his contact form in the chat. So if you want to give him a call, please do go through that link. I will also put it on in the description at the top. So if you're watching this video later and you're wanting to know how do I get in touch with Harrison, well, it's in the description. So guys, feel free to reach out to him. I work with Harrison probably every day. So we have a lot of conversations about, what's going on with clients, how he can help someone that I am working with. So I have confidence that Harrison knows exactly what he's doing and he's only going to do the best for you. So Harrison, thank you so much for coming on today. I know I kind of threw this out at you
I
and said,
love it.
I'm going to do a live talking about second mortgages. Would you like to come on and have a conversation? So I appreciate that.
I appreciate you having me on here. If you have any questions, guys, feel free to just reach out. Obviously, you can click on the link or click on the profile. Thank you so much for having us, Christy. Have a great rest of your Friday, guys.
Thank you. You too. Bye-bye.